I'm going to demonstrate how we can re-extract the soluble calcium acetate into an insoluble form in the form of calcium carbonate. So for this experiment, the first thing we're going to need is our cup with the 2 extractions of the calcium carbonate from the eggshells into the vinegar. So this is the cup with my 2 completed calcium acetate solutions. And it very likely contains a substantial amount of unreacted vinegar as well. Next, I am going to bring in my saturated sodium carbonate solution. And to complete the experiment, we're going to need some items to make it work. First, I am going to need to know the exact volume of sodium carbonate solution that I am adding to my mixture. So I will need a graduated cylinder. Next, I will need to do filtration because I will have a precipitate forming in this process. And today I am going to do a Buchner or vacuum filtration. For that, I am going to need a Buchner flask, a Buchner funnel, and a rubber hose to connect to the vacuum line. Now, filtration is not complete without filter paper. And I will need to find one that fits inside my funnel. It is important that I find something that fits just right and it covers all the pores of the funnel. If not, I need to find a larger one and cut it down to size. Because at the end, I will need to wash my precipitate. I will need some deionized water as well. And finally, after I extract my precipitate, I will need to record its mass. So I will need a scale. And I will need to dry it. So I will use a watch glass and a source of heat, which in this case will be the hot plate. So we have a lot of work to do. Let's get started. First, we're going to perform the precipitation reaction. For this one, we'll need 70 milliliters of the saturated sodium carbonate solution. I have my graduated cylinder here. We can have a little more or a little less. It is important to keep track of the volume that we are adding. I have 69.8 milliliters of the saturated sodium carbonate solution in my graduated cylinder. And now I will slowly pour it into my cup that contains the calcium acetate solution with likely some excess vinegar. When it starts bubbling, it's best to slow down so that you don't lose any of your material. If I would like to, I can use a spatula or a stirring rod and stir it a little bit. But what is important here is that I give it enough time for the reaction to complete, and then I will allow some time for the solid to settle to the bottom. That will make the filtration process much more efficient. The precipitate is slowly settling. And we should start seeing a little bit more of this white precipitate falling to the bottom. This is the right time to set up our filtration. As we wait for the precipitate to settle, we can put aside all the things that we're not using anymore and prepare the filtration. First, we turn on the vacuum line. We should hear the hissing. Then we add a very small amount of water into our funnel. And that will cause the filter paper to get wet and to stick to the funnel. Next, We connect it to the vacuum line and extract the water through. If we hear some odd noises, that simply means that our seal is maybe incomplete, and then we may want to push gently, very gently, down on the funnel to create that tight seal. Or our filter paper is not completely dry, and then it can give that sharp whistling noise. When we are ready, and this looks just right, we can start pouring through the funnel. It may happen that bubbles will go through, and that's simply the result of the proteins causing the formation of surfactants. It's absolutely normal. We just don't want any of them to go into the vacuum line. Now, if this becomes a reoccurring issue, a simple solution to that is to take off the funnel, discard the contents of the flask, and start again with the clean flask. Because at the end of the day, the only thing we need is the calcium carbonate that will collect on top of the filter paper. Whatever goes through is our unreacted sodium carbonate or our sodium acetate that is the side product of the reaction, both of which are soluble in water. I emptied and washed my flask, and now I'm ready to do the second part of the filtration. Connect again to the vacuum line. Make sure that the connection has a tight seal, and then transfer the remaining mixture into the filter. If the filtration slows down, that may be a sign that our filter paper is clogging up. At that time, we can have two options. One, we can set up another filtration setup and filter it again. Or, number two, we can be patient and let it go through all the way without changing the filter paper. The second option is better because that way you don't lose any of the product in the transfer process. Once my filtration is complete, there may be still some foamy stuff floating on top of the solid that is collecting on the filter paper, and that's normally okay. We're going to add a small amount of deionized water in our cup, rinse it really well, and transfer it to the funnel. We do this twice to make sure that as much of our sodium carbonate as possible has transferred over. The deionized water thus added will also serve as the washing liquid that goes through the calcium carbonate and will remove all water-soluble contents. After all the water went through and the solid and the paper seem just moist, no longer wet with water on top of it, then we can disconnect from the vacuum line and we are ready to dry the filter paper and the precipitate. So disconnect and turn off the vacuum. Next, I am going to bring in my watch glass and a spatula. I'm going to scrape the sides of the funnel and make sure that the contents are on the filter paper when I extract it. So I will gently coax the filter paper out from the funnel and transfer it onto my watch glass. If there is precipitate left in the funnel, I will coax it over and transfer it to the watch glass. And then I am ready to dry it. So I will set aside my filtration setup, bring in the hot plate, turn it on a gentle heat, and place my watch glass with the filter paper and its contents on top of the watch glass. And then I will simply wait until the filter paper and the solid on top is dry. It has been a couple minutes, probably about 10 or so, And my filter paper is dry and the solid on top is clearly dry. And one way to tell that it is that it will become powdery. When it's ready, the next thing is for us to get the weight of our solid. So we're going to turn off the hot plate. And when it cools down enough, remove the watch glass with the solid on top. We are at the final step of our process, and that is recording the mass of the calcium carbonate that formed from the calcium that was extracted from the eggshells. For this step, we are going to need a scale. Turn it on. Then we're going to do two things. First, place a weighing boat on top of it, and then we're going to place a clean filter paper that is dry on top of it. At that point, we're going to tare it. We'll remove the clean filter paper and set it aside. And then we will transfer the filter paper with the solid on top onto the weighing boat. And now what we record is simply the mass of the solid that is on top of the filter paper. And for that, we have 5.08 grams for this eggshell. Your number may be slightly different because there are plenty of variations in egg size and eggshell thickness. So if you get more or less, don't be surprised. It's not always the technique. It's the variance in the amount of calcium carbonate that is in each eggshell.